Keanu Reeves walked through the hospital halls, his steps quiet but purposeful. The air smelled of antiseptic, and the walls were lined with soft beeping monitors and whispers of doctors making their rounds. He had come for one visit, one sick child whose wish was to meet him, but something inside him told him to stay longer. Room after room he stopped by, speaking to patients young and old. Some recognized him instantly, their tired faces lighting up with joy. Others, too weak to speak, simply smiled as he sat beside them, holding their hands. He listened to their stories, their dreams, their regrets. He brought small gifts, books, flowers, handwritten notes of encouragement. When he met a boy who loved action movies, Keanu performed slow-motion fight scenes right there by his bed, making the boy laugh so hard his mother had to remind him to breathe. An elderly woman told him she used to dance when she was younger, but hadn't moved in years. Keanu gently took her hands and swayed with her in the chair, whispering, "You're still dancing." A father who had lost hope sat in silence until Keanu simply placed a hand on his shoulder, saying, "I see you, I hear you." The man broke down in quiet sobs, but when Keanu left, there was something lighter in his eyes. He didn't know how many rooms he had visited. Time seemed to stretch and blur. The hospital, once heavy with sorrow, now carried something else, something unseen but felt by all. And then, just as quietly as he had arrived, Keanu left. Days passed, then weeks, and something strange began to happen. Patients who had been declared terminal started improving. Some, who doctors swore had no chance, made complete recoveries. The medical staff couldn't explain it. Families called it a miracle. Stories spread about the man in black who had walked through the hospital like a shadow, leaving behind nothing but hope. Keanu never spoke about it. When asked, he would only smile and say, "Sometimes all people need is to be seen." And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, hospitals continued to whisper his name. Whispers of Keanu's visit spread beyond that single hospital. Nurses spoke in hushed voices about the patients who had suddenly started improving. Families held on to hope where there had been none. Even doctors, trained to rely on science, found themselves questioning what had happened. Then something even stranger occurred. More hospitals reported similar events. Patients who had been unresponsive suddenly opened their eyes. People who had been fighting for their last breaths found new strength. A little girl in another city, whose parents had been told to say their goodbyes, woke up one morning and simply said, "Keanu was here." But Keanu Reeves had never visited that hospital, at least, not physically. Stories poured in from around the world, places he had never set foot in. People described the same thing, a quiet man in a black jacket sitting by their bedside, holding their hands, listening. Some said he whispered words of encouragement, others claimed he only smiled, but always after he left they felt lighter, stronger, alive. Reporters tried to track him down, questioning him at press events, movie premieres, anywhere he appeared. Keanu only gave his usual warm, knowing smile and said, "I was probably just a dream." And maybe that was the truth. Maybe he had only visited a handful of people, and the rest was just stories, wishful thinking. But late at night, when the world was quiet, Keanu sometimes sat by his window looking at the city below. He thought of the hands he had held, the faces he had seen, and then just for a second he would feel something, a warmth, a presence. As if somewhere in the world someone was sitting beside him, whispering, "I see you too." One evening, Keanu Reeves sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the glow of the city stretching endlessly outside his window. He had stopped questioning the stories. He no longer wondered how his presence had reached people he had never met. He simply accepted it, just as they had. But then something happened that he could not explain. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Keanu, it's our turn now." A chill ran down his spine, but not out of fear. It was something deeper, something unspoken. He stared at the message, his fingers hovering over the screen. Before he could respond, another notification appeared. A new voicemail. He hesitated before pressing play. A soft static filled the room, followed by faint whispers, overlapping voices, dozens, maybe hundreds. They were gentle, warm, familiar. Then, one voice rose above the rest, a child's voice. "Thank you for seeing us, Keanu. Now we see you too." Keanu inhaled sharply. The warmth he had felt in those hospital rooms now surrounded him, pressing gently against his chest. He wasn't alone. He had never been alone. Slowly he stood and walked to his balcony. The air was still, yet it hummed with something alive. The city below flickered with a strange glow, but it wasn't from streetlights. It was softer, like the light of distant stars. And then, for just a moment, the world seemed to pause. The air shimmered, bending like a ripple in time. The city's noise faded, and in that brief stillness Keanu saw them, figures standing on rooftops, in windows, on empty sidewalks. They weren't ghosts, they weren't shadows. They were them, the people he had visited, the ones who had healed, the ones who had moved on. They smiled, and then, in the blink of an eye, they were gone. Keanu exhaled, a small knowing smile tugging at his lips. He didn't need to ask if it was real. He already knew the answer. Looking up at the sky, he whispered, "I see you too." Far above, a constellation shimmered, a pattern that had never been there before. It spelled one word: Keanu. Keanu Reeves stood there staring at the sky, his name written among the stars. It should have been impossible. It was impossible. But after everything that had happened, he no longer questioned the impossible. A gentle breeze moved through the balcony, carrying something unseen yet deeply felt. It wasn't just the wind, it was them, the people he had touched, the lives he had unknowingly saved, the ones who had somehow found a way to reach back. For the first time in a long time, Keanu felt something shift inside him. He had spent his life giving, his kindness, his time, his presence. But now, for the first time, he truly understood. He had been given something in return. That night, he slept more peacefully than he had in years, and when he woke, something had changed. His phone, usually filled with messages, calls, and schedules, was empty. No texts, no missed calls, no appointments. His calendar, once packed with meetings and shoots, had been completely cleared. Confused but strangely calm, he stepped outside. The world looked the same, but something was different. People passed him on the street, their eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite place. Recognition? Understanding? Then a woman approached him. She had kind eyes, and there was something familiar about her, though he was sure they had never met. She smiled. "Keanu," she said softly, "are you ready?" Keanu didn't ask for what. He didn't need to. He simply smiled back. And as they walked together down the street, the world around them began to change. The colors became richer. The light became softer. The people, passers-by who had once been strangers, began to fade, like echoes of another time. Keanu kept walking. He didn't look back. He already knew where he was going. Somewhere beyond the city, beyond time, beyond even the stars themselves. They were waiting for him.